All right, so former Marine General John Kelly, Donald Trump's longest-serving White House chief of staff, has warned that if elected again, his former boss would govern like a dictator, lack empathy, and have no understanding of the U.S. Constitution. Now, other Trump administration officials have criticized the convicted felon, but Kelly may just be the most high-profile so far. In an interview published by the New York Times, he had grave concerns about Trump's fitness for office. Let's take a listen.
He said to you that Hitler did a lot of good things.
Well, I tell him that. I said, if you, first of all, you should never say that. But if you knew what Hitler was all about from the beginning to the end, everything he did was in support of his racist, fascist life, philosophy, so that nothing he did you could argue was good. It was certainly not done for the right reason. And but he would occasionally say that.
What would he say when you would lay that out to him?
He just, that would be the end of the conversation usually.
What do you think? Do you think he's a fascist?
Well, I'm looking at the definition of fascism. It's a far-right, authoritarian, ultranationalist political ideology and movement characterized by a dictatorial leader, centralized autocracy, militarism, forcible suppression of opposition, belief in a natural social hierarchy. So certainly, in my experience, those are the kind of things that he thinks would work better in terms of running America. Again, back to this issue of, democracy is complicated, messy to operate, probably the worst kind of government there is, except for all the other ones. I think Churchill once said that. And again, our Constitution, our founding is built in to the Constitution and to the way our government operates, built in a lot of checks and balances, and didn't design the government to be streamlined and whatnot. So, but certainly the former president is in the far right area. He's certainly an authoritarian, admires people who are dictators. He has said that. So he certainly falls into the general definition of fascist, for sure.
He basically said to you that those who died for America on the battlefield were losers and suckers, and he said it more than once.
Yes, but he would say it would always, something else would get him going off at times again McCain. He never could wrap his arms around why people would serve the country in uniform. What was in it for them? That was the general theme.
And here is what Vice President Kamala Harris had to say about General Kelly's comments.
Who will be loyal to him personally. One that will obey his orders even when he tells them to break the law or abandon their oath to the Constitution of the United States. In just the past week, Donald Trump has repeatedly called his fellow Americans the enemy from within, and even said that he would use the United States military to go after American citizens. And let's be clear about who he considers to be the enemy from within. Anyone who refuses to bend a knee or dares to criticize him would qualify, in his mind, as the enemy within, like judges, like journalists, like nonpartisan election officials. It is deeply troubling and incredibly dangerous that Donald Trump would invoke Adolf Hitler, the man who is responsible for the deaths of 6 million Jews and hundreds of thousands of Americans. All of this is further evidence for the American people of who Donald Trump really is. This is a window into who Donald Trump really is, from the people who know him best, from the people who worked with him side by side in the Oval Office and in the Situation Room. And it is clear from John Kelly's words that Donald Trump is someone who, I quote, certainly falls into the general definition of fascist, who in fact vowed to be a dictator on day one and vowed to use the military as his personal militia to carry out his personal and political vendettas. Donald Trump is increasingly unhinged and unstable. And in a second term, people like John Kelly would not be there to be the guardrails against his propensities and his actions. Those who once tried to stop him from pursuing his worst impulses would no longer be there, and no longer be there to rein him in. So the bottom line is this. We know what Donald Trump wants. He wants unchecked power. The question in 13 days will be, what do the American people want? Thank you.
All right, I am now joined by Rebecca Carruthers. She is Vice President of the Fair Election Center in Washington, D.C. Also joined by Joy Cheney, founder of Joy Strategies, also out of Washington, D.C. Joy, let me start with you. Listen, I don't think that there's anything here that is very surprising, except for the fact that now we are hearing this from a general. Do you think that this makes a lot of difference in this regard?
I mean, it's difficult for me to say so because Donald Trump has said some of the worst things ever. Many of the things that are included here, people already know. John Kelly has already been critical. John Kelly has already said that he has said members of the military are suckers and losers. It's obvious that he is an authoritarian leader, which I appreciate John Kelly just saying, if it quacks like a duck and it walks like a duck, it is a duck. Donald Trump is an authoritarian, and he seems to have a fascination with authoritarian leaders. And there's a little bit of sociopathy there where he just doesn't understand that you can't, like, to honor and to exalt Hitler is a real problem for the world. He must know that. But there's some kind of distance between what a normal human would feel and what he would feel. It is dangerous to have this person in office. I hope that it makes a difference for Republican women who Liz Cheney is talking to, who I think John Kelly is talking to, Republican people, moderates. But if you're on the fence, that combined with Dobbs, why support Donald Trump? It doesn't matter what your husband's doing. It doesn't matter what you think you might get in some kind of tax package. You don't want someone who wants to undermine democracy and your freedoms at the same time. I think it should say something to, Black men who might be out there saying, the Democratic Party has disappointed me. I want to be a disruptor. Donald Trump is too high a price to pay to have an exercise in disruption. What he's advocating is the death of democracy. And Black men will be the first ones to be caught up in that. So I'm hoping that for people who are on the margins, they understand that this is not the kind of person we want.
Yeah, and not only on the margin, Joy, but the people who are saying, you know what, I don't like the choice, so I'm just going to stay home and actually not vote. Rebecca, I want to turn it over to you. Do you think it makes a difference that this is the New York Times, that this does feel slightly more official? And yes, the general has said these things before, but now we're really close to the election. It looks like he's beginning to make his rounds in a more official capacity.
Well, thanks for having me tonight. For those people who read or listen to, watch, consume the New York Times, for the most part, those people have already made up their minds, and some of those people have already voted. Right now, we need to think about those who feel like they have nothing to lose. They feel like neither party is talking to them. Those are the types of people that, are the ones that we should be compelling at this point, and making sure that there is actually options on the ballot for people who feel like they have nothing to lose. There are a lot of people hurting in this country. And I would say, regardless of which party, the parties need to talk to those people who are hurting. Even though we know the economy is doing well, there are still people who are feeling their pennies being pinched, knowing that food prices have went up over the last decade. Fuel prices have went up. Housing prices have skyrocketed. So for the people who are hurting in this country, I don't know that a New York Times article is really speaking to them. And so I would encourage both campaigns. You have to talk to the people in the streets.
Mm-hmm. And, Rebecca, I want to follow up with you. 20 years ago, you compared somebody to Hitler. That was a problem. People would have a serious problem with that. I think it's very interesting in the meantime that this is somebody who the general has said that Trump really wants to follow, wants loyalists and people under him who were like Hitler's loyalists. Though if people read history, we know that those loyalists were also often in cahoots to try to kill Hitler. So it seems like there's a real miss in terms of the understanding of history, as always. And certainly, perhaps we're immune to this whole idea of Hitler even becoming a part of the conversation. Do you see that as the case here, Rebecca?
Well, in understanding the many steps to fascism and fascism regime, it requires, banning books. It requires misinformation. It requires intentional disinformation campaigns within a society. So when those elements are starting to happen, when you're seeing that broad swaths of media, whether it's Sinclair News or it's Elon Musk's X, formerly known as Twitter, where you're seeing that these places where people go to get information is now being compromised by people with a set agenda, knowing that everyone has an agenda, but a set disinformation and or misinformation agenda, then people don't know, especially if they don't have books available where they can actually learn and research. Even when we see certain states where critical race theory, CRT is banned, DEI is banned. Well, basically, they are trying to ban elements of history. So we all know the adage, if you don't teach history, if you don't know history, then that population is doomed to repeat history. So as we look at what the march to fascism looks like, it also requires banning of critical information.
So I want to talk about, Joy, Black men. You brought this up. In fact, you both brought it up. What can actually change the tide in potentially getting Black men who do not want to vote or are not going to vote for Kamala Harris to actually cross over? Is there anything that you see that can happen? These are a group that have been taking up the headlines and really making a mark in terms of the power that they have. If you have someone in your house that is sitting home saying, listen, I'm not going to vote, is there anything you think that can cross them over? If it's not the former supporters of the former president who have crossed over and said, this is not the man you want, then who can do it?
Well, first of all, let me just say, only on the Black Star Network and on Roland's show will I talk about Black men. When I do other things, I'm not going to do it anymore because I want to talk about white women. On those networks, I want to talk only about what white women are going to do to show up and vote and what we're going to do to convince them to come out.
Sure.
That said, on this network, to all the Black men listening, I hope that you are going in your barbershops, your churches, your friendship circles, your friendship chain group. Listen, we know that Donald Trump is not the answer for our community, for the nation, for the world. We know this. What John Kelly is saying today is just yet another example. This is not the time to make a point to the Democratic Party. This is the time to do that is after, right? We have our democracy. Even if you don't believe that we have a democracy, this man is trying to take back whatever gains we actually have. And he has proven himself to be someone who will incarcerate us, who does not respect Black people. The economy was not better under him, even if you felt it. Well, that was the residual effects of Barack Obama. We have improved our economy. Don't let him trick you into doing something that would harm you first. We know that that is the case. And we know he's a fascist. And that none of those are your values. And so at the end of the day, I think it's really hard to like talk to someone blanketly, but I think you have to ask why they're supporting Donald Trump, why they're apathetic. I went on the campaign trail this past week. I went to Pennsylvania, York, Pennsylvania, and I met a black man, young black man, who wasn't planning to vote. And my only request to him, after I shook his hand and I listened to him, and he said he just didn't see a connection between the election and himself. He didn't like Donald Trump. After I said that, what I asked him to do was just make me a commitment that you would research the Harris campaign, that you would ask yourself, is it her that you have a problem with? And he said, no. I said, but don't punish her for all of the things that came before. You know that she would be a better president than these others. Don't you want to turn the page? It is connected. We talked about student loans. We talked about all the things that do impact his life, and he agreed to do it. At this point, that's the best that I can do. But Democrats, when we win, because I have faith that we will win, we cannot wait until an election year to try to bring over Black voters. It's too transactional. We need to be working on people before.
In 2016, Donald Trump said he would choose only the best people to work in his White House. Now those people have a warning for America. Trump is not fit to be president again. Here's his vice president.
Anyone who puts himself over the Constitution should never be president of the United States. It should come as no surprise that I will not be endorsing Donald Trump this year.
His defense secretary.
Do you think Trump can be trusted with the nation's secrets ever again?
No. I mean, it's just irresponsible action that places our service members at risk, places our nation's security at risk.
His national security advisor.
Donald Trump will cause a lot of damage. The only thing he cares about is Donald Trump.
And the nation's highest-ranking military officer.
We don't take an oath to a king or a queen or to a tyrant or a dictator. And we don't take an oath to a wannabe dictator.
Take it from the people who knew him best. Donald Trump is a danger to our troops and our democracy. We can't let him lead our country again.
I'm Kamala Harris, and I approve this message.